My name is Sarah. I used to think family meant something, until the day my sister smiled while taking everything that was mine. It wasn't just a house she took from me. It was the last place where I could still hear our mother's voice echoing through the hallways, humming her favorite hymn while she watered those purple violets on the kitchen windowsill. It was the place where Grandma's cinnamon rolls still seemed to perfume the air on Sunday mornings, even 3 years after she'd passed. It held every Christmas morning, every scraped knee kissed better, every whispered secret between sisters who once promised to share everything forever. But promises, I learned, dissolve faster than sugar in rain. The day our father died, I thought grief would be the hardest thing I'd face. I was wrong. The hardest thing was sitting in that cold lawyer's office 2 weeks later, watching my sister, Jennifer, slide legal documents across the mahogany table with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you've already won. Dad wanted to simplify things, she said, not meeting my eyes. The house goes to me, clean and simple. The lawyer's voice became background noise as he read the will, something about Jennifer being better positioned to maintain the property, and how Dad had revised his wishes in his final months. I felt my world tilt sideways, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart through thick glass. Before we continue, drop a comment. Where are you watching this from and what time is it there? I'd love to know how far this story is reaching. Sometimes when our world feels small and broken, it helps to know we're not alone in the darkness. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask when exactly Dad had decided I wasn't worthy of the home where I'd changed his bandages during his last illness, where I'd slept on the uncomfortable chair beside his bed for 3 months, where I'd held his hand as he breathed his last breath. But grief had stolen my voice, leaving only a hollow ache where words should have been. Jennifer signed the papers with a flourish, her wedding ring catching the fluorescent light. She'd always been the golden child, the one who married the successful banker who lived in the suburbs with her perfect lawn and matching Christmas decorations. The one who visited Dad once a month with store-bought cookies and stayed for exactly 2 hours. I was the one who never left. I was the one who quit my marketing job to care for him when the cancer returned. I was the one who learned to cook his favorite meals when his appetite disappeared, who drove him to endless doctor appointments, who held back tears when he forgot my name on the bad days. I was the daughter who loved him enough to sacrifice everything, while she was the daughter who loved him enough to visit. Apparently, visits were worth more than devotion. The house transfer happened quickly. Within a month, Jennifer had keys to the 3-bedroom colonial where we'd grown up, where our swing set still stood in the backyard, rusted but defiant. She started sending me photos almost immediately, pictures of contractors ripping up the hardwood floors Dad had installed himself 40 years ago, of walls being painted sterile white over the soft yellow Mom had chosen because it reminded her of sunshine. Finally modernizing this old place, her text would read, accompanied by pictures of Mom's violets being thrown into garbage bags. Each photo felt like a small death. I moved into a cramped apartment near the train tracks, where the walls were thin enough that I could hear my neighbors' arguments and the 6 a.m. freight train that rattled my windows. The deposit and first month's rent took most of my savings. I got a job at the local library, shelving books and helping elderly patrons find large print novels. It was quiet work, which suited me. Quiet seemed to be all I had left. The apartment had no garden, no memories, no ghosts that whispered comfort in the middle of sleepless nights. It was a place to exist, not a place to live. I bought a single violet from the grocery store and placed it on my windowsill, but it died within 2 weeks. Even plants could sense the difference between a home and a hiding place. Jennifer called me once during those first few months, her voice bright with forced cheer. "You should come see what we've done with the place," she said. "It's completely transformed, very modern, very open concept." "I'm busy," I told her, which was true in the way that surviving is always busy work. "Sarah, I know you're upset, but Dad made his choice. We have to respect that." The line went quiet for a long moment. Then I heard her sigh, the the same impatient sound she used to make when we were children, and I couldn't keep up with her bike. He knew I could take better care of it, she added softly, and something in her tone made me understand that she actually believed this. She truly thought she deserved our childhood home more than I did. She thought her suburban success and her banker husband made her more worthy of our family's history. That night, I sat on my apartment floor with a bottle of wine and looked through photo albums I'd managed to salvage before Jennifer changed the locks. Pictures of us as children, building snow forts in the backyard. Pictures of family dinners around the table that was now probably in some estate sale. Pictures of Mom teaching us to bake in the kitchen that was now probably granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. I wasn't looking for revenge that night. I was looking for understanding. Why had Dad really changed his will? When had he decided I wasn't enough? What had Jennifer said to him during those monthly visits that I hadn't been able to accomplish? In 3 years of daily care? I started reading. First the will itself, which I'd requested a copy of from the lawyer. Then inheritance law. Then property law. I spent hours after work at the library, diving into legal databases and precedent cases. I wasn't planning anything. I was just trying to understand how I'd become so invisible in my own family's story. It was during one of those late-night research sessions that I found it. Buried in the 3rd page of Dad's will, in language so dry and technical that I'd skipped over it the first dozen times, was a clause I'd never noticed. A standard legal provision that Dad's lawyer had probably included without thinking. The kind of boilerplate language that gets copied from one document to another without anyone paying attention. In the event that the primary beneficiary does not establish permanent residence within the inherited property within 12 months, first right of refusal shall pass to the next living relative, as defined by blood relation, at fair market value. I read it again. Then again. Jennifer hadn't moved into the house. She'd never planned to. She lived in her pristine suburban home with her banker husband and their 2 kids, 30 miles away from our childhood neighborhood. She was renovating our family home to flip it, to sell it to strangers who would never know that Mom used to sing lullabies in the upstairs bedroom, or that Dad built that treehouse in the backyard with his own arthritic hands. My heart started beating faster as I read the clause again, and then I did something I hadn't done in months. I smiled. The next morning, I called the lawyer who had handled Mom's affairs years ago. A kind woman named Patricia Chen who remembered Mom's violet collection and had always sent Christmas cards. She agreed to meet with me that afternoon. "This is interesting," Patricia said, adjusting her reading glasses as she reviewed Dad's will. "Your sister's been marketing the property, hasn't she?" "She listed it last week," I confirmed. "Asking? Price is $400,000. Patricia nodded. "And she never established residency. Never changed her address. Never moved in." She looked up at me with something that might have been respect. "Sarah, this clause is ironclad. If you can match the fair market value, that house is legally yours." I had been saving for years, living carefully, investing the small inheritance Mom had left me. I had enough for a down payment and could qualify for a mortgage for the rest. It would mean using every penny I had. But I could do it. For the first time since Dad's funeral, I felt like I could breathe. Jennifer had taught me something valuable during those months of silence and photos and casual cruelty. She'd taught me that family loyalty was a luxury only some of us could afford. She'd taught me that love could be measured in square footage and real estate values. She'd taught me that the daughter who stayed was worth less than the daughter who left. But she'd also taught me something else. Something I don't think she intended. She'd taught me that sometimes justice comes quietly, dressed in legal language and fine print. Sometimes it comes to those who know how to read between the lines, who understand that the meek don't just inherit the earth. Sometimes they inherit the house too. I spent the next week preparing. I had Patricia review every document, every legal requirement. I arranged financing through my credit union. I had the property appraised independently to ensure my offer met fair market value. I did everything by the book, everything precisely and legally and undeniably correct. On the day Jennifer was supposed to close with her buyer, I was ready. The phone call came at 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was at work, helping a patron find books about grief counseling, when my phone buzzed with Jennifer's number. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again. And again. By the fourth call, I answered. "What the hell did you do?" Her voice was shaking, higher pitched than usual. "I exercised my legal right," I said calmly, still shelving books. "According to the clause in Dad's will." "What clause?" "There's no clause. You can't just—" "Page 3, paragraph 2, subsection C," I interrupted. "First right of refusal. You never moved in, Jennifer. You never established permanent residence. The house defaults to the next blood relative at fair market value." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long, I thought she'd hung up. "You planned this," she finally whispered. "You've been planning this all along." I thought about that accusation as I finished shelving the grief counseling books. Had I planned it? Or had I simply paid attention while she assumed I was too broken to fight back? "I read the will," I said. "All of it. Apparently that makes me the only one who did." "This isn't over," she said, but her voice had lost its edge. She sounded scared now, uncertain. "I'll fight this. I'll take it to court." "You can try," I agreed. "But the law is the law, Jennifer. And I learned something these past few months. Sometimes the person who looks like they're losing is actually just getting ready to win." She hung up without saying goodbye, the same way she'd been ending our conversations for months. 2 weeks later, I held the keys to our childhood home in my palm. They felt heavier than I remembered, warm from my grip and smooth from decades of use. I stood on the front porch for a long moment before opening the door, breathing in the scent of fresh paint and new carpet that couldn't quite cover the familiar smell of home that lived in the walls themselves. Jennifer had gutted most of the interior, but the bones of the house were still there. The creaky step halfway up the stairs, the way the afternoon light slanted through the living room windows, the view from the kitchen window where Mom used to stand and watch for Dad to come home from work. I walked through each room slowly, taking inventory of what had changed and what had endured. In the master bedroom, she'd painted over the pencil marks on the doorframe where Dad had measured our heights each birthday. But if I looked closely, I could still see the faint impressions of the numbers, ghost marks that spoke of children, growing up and time passing and love that leaves traces, even when someone tries to erase it. The kitchen was unrecognizable, all granite and stainless steel, like something from a magazine. But when I opened the window above the sink, the same breeze that used to carry the scent of Mom's roses still whispered through the screen. In the basement, I found them. 3 cardboard boxes labeled "Junk, Dispose" in Jennifer's careful handwriting. Inside were photo albums, Mom's recipe cards, Dad's tools, and a small collection of ceramic figurines that had sat on the mantelpiece for as long as I could remember. She'd been planning to throw away our family's history along with the garbage. I carried the boxes upstairs and set them in the living room, then sat on the floor and opened the first album. Pictures of Jennifer and me as toddlers, both of us, grinning gap-toothed smiles at the camera. Pictures of family vacations, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. Evidence of a time when we'd been sisters, before we'd become strangers competing for the same inheritance. There was a loose photo tucked into the back of the album, Mom and Dad on their wedding day, looking impossibly young and hopeful. On the back, in Mom's careful cursive, she'd written, "For Jennifer and Sarah, may you always remember that home is wherever love lives." I held that photo for a long time, thinking about love and home and the difference between the two. Jennifer had inherited a house, but I had inherited something else. The knowledge that I was strong enough to lose everything and still find a way to win it back. That night, I slept in my childhood bedroom for the first time in almost a year. The room looked different with fresh paint and new carpet, but the window still faced east, and the morning sun still painted golden rectangles on the floor, where I used to lie and read books on summer afternoons. I dreamed about Mom that night. She was in the kitchen, humming while she watered her violets, just like always. In the dream. She looked up and smiled at me. "Welcome home, sweetheart," she said, and her voice sounded like forgiveness. When I woke up, sunlight was streaming through the familiar window, and for the first moment in months, I felt peace. Not the hollow quiet of my apartment near the train tracks, but the deep peace that comes from being exactly where you belong. I made coffee in Jennifer's sterile kitchen and took it out to the backyard, where our old swing set still stood among the overgrown grass. The metal was rusty, the wooden seats weathered gray, but it was still there, still waiting. I sat on my old swing and pushed myself gently back and forth, listening to the familiar squeak of the chains and watching the sun climb over the neighbors' rooftops. This was what Jennifer had never understood. It wasn't about the monetary value, or the property investment, or the prestigious address. It was about continuity. It was about belonging somewhere that remembered you as a child, that held your history in its walls, and your dreams in its corners. The first few weeks in the house were quiet. I spent my days off work slowly undoing Jennifer's renovations where I could. I couldn't afford to replace the expensive countertops or redo the floors, but I could paint the walls back to colors that felt like home. I found Mom's paint samples tucked away in Dad's desk drawer, soft yellow for the kitchen, pale blue for the living room, the warm cream that had made every room feel cozy, even on the darkest winter days. I planted new violets in the kitchen windowsill, 3 small pots that I bought from the same nursery where Mom had always shopped. The elderly owner, Mrs. Patterson, remembered me. "Sarah, I was so sorry to hear about your father," she said, her hands gentle as she helped me select the healthiest plants. "Your mother always said you had her green thumb. These will do well for you." As the violets took root and began to bloom, something inside me began to heal too. Not the sharp, broken healing of moving on, but the deep healing of coming home. I fell back into the rhythm of the house, the way the floorboards creaked in the morning, the way the afternoon light pooled in the living room, the way the kitchen window framed the sunrise perfectly. I started cooking again, really cooking, using Mom's recipe cards that I'd rescued from Jennifer's junk boxes. Her handwriting was faded but still legible, and I could almost hear her voice guiding me through the steps. "Don't overmix the batter, sweetheart. Fold it gentle, like you're tucking a baby into bed." The house began to smell like cinnamon and vanilla again, like love baked into bread and memories simmered into soup. It was 3 months after I'd moved back in when Jennifer showed up unannounced. I was in the garden, trying to coax Mom's old rose bushes back to life, when I heard a car door slam in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I saw Jennifer walking toward the front door, her designer heels clicking against the concrete. She looked smaller somehow, less sure of herself than she had in the lawyer's office. I took my time washing the dirt from my hands before answering the door. When I opened it, we stood looking at each other across the threshold like strangers, which I suppose we had become. "Sarah," she said, and her voice was different than I remembered. Softer, less certain. "Jennifer, can I come in?" I stepped aside, and she walked into the living room that had once been her renovation project. I'd painted over her sterile white walls and hung some of Mom and Dad's old family photos that she'd packed away. The room looked lived in again, comfortable in a way that magazine-perfect spaces never could be. She stood in the center of the room, turning slowly to take it all in. Her eyes stopped on the mantelpiece, where I'd replaced her modern decorative, objects with Mom's ceramic figurines and a photo of our parents on their anniversary. "You changed everything back," she said, and I couldn't tell if she was angry or sad. "I changed it to what it was supposed to be," I corrected. She nodded slowly, still looking around the room like she was seeing it for the first time. The buyers were furious, you know. They'd already arranged financing, picked out furniture. They threatened to sue me for breach of contract. Did they? No. Their lawyer explained about the clause. Said I should have read the will more carefully. She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Apparently, I'm not as smart as I thought I was. I waited. I'd learned the power of silence over these past months, learned that sometimes the most important conversations happen in the spaces between words. I never meant for it to happen like this, she said finally. When Dad was sick, he was so worried about what would happen to the house. He said you were too fragile, too emotional. He was afraid you'd let it fall apart, or that you wouldn't be able to handle the finances. The words stung, but not as much as I'd expected them to. Maybe because I'd already mourned the version of my father who saw me clearly. Maybe because I'd proven to myself that I was stronger than anyone had believed, even me. I told him I could take care of it, Jennifer continued. I told him I'd make sure it was maintained properly, that it wouldn't become a burden for you. I thought I was helping. By taking it away from me completely, she flinched. I thought you'd be relieved. You'd been taking care of him for so long, sacrificing so much. I thought you'd want to be free of the responsibility. You thought wrong. Yes, she whispered. I did. We stood in silence for a moment. Two sisters who had grown up in this same room, who had shared a childhood and then lost each other somewhere along the way to adulthood and assumptions, and the complicated mathematics of family love. I miss them, she said suddenly. Mom and Dad. I miss them, and I miss us, the way we used to be. I thought about the photo album I'd been looking through the night before. Pictures of us building snow forts and sharing ice cream cones. Two little girls who thought they'd be best friends forever. We were different people then, I said. Were we? Or did we just forget who we were supposed to be to each other? It was a fair question, and I didn't have an answer for it. The sister who had swooped in with legal papers and renovation plans felt like a stranger. But the woman standing in my living room now, looking lost and regretful, reminded me of the girl who used to sneak into my room during thunderstorms. I can't give you the house back, I said finally. Even if I wanted to. This is my home now. It always was. I know, she said. I'm not asking for that. I wanted to see it. To see what you've done with it. To see if there was any way to. She trailed off, shaking her head. I don't know what I wanted. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, for the first time in months. She was thinner than I remembered, and there were shadows under her eyes that expensive concealer couldn't quite hide. Success, it seemed, wasn't as fulfilling as she'd expected it to be. Would you like some coffee? I asked. I made cinnamon rolls this morning. Mom's recipe. For a moment, her face transformed, becoming younger, softer, more like the sister I remembered. I'd like that, she said. We sat at the kitchen table, not the granite island she'd installed, but the old wooden table I'd bought at an estate sale, something that belonged in a family kitchen. I served the cinnamon rolls on Mom's good china, the plates with the tiny blue flowers that we'd only been allowed to use on special occasions. Jennifer took a bite and closed her eyes. It tastes exactly like hers. I had to practice. The first batch was terrible. Remember how she used to let us help? We'd make such a mess, flour everywhere, and she'd just laugh and say that was what made them taste like love. You always ate the dough when she wasn't looking. You always told on me, but she was smiling when she said it. We ate in comfortable silence for a while. Two middle-aged women sitting in the kitchen where we'd eaten countless childhood meals, where Mom had bandaged our scraped knees and helped us with homework and listened to our teenage heartbreaks. I'm sorry, Jennifer said finally, for all of it. For not understanding what this place meant to you. For assuming I knew what was best. For for not being the sister you needed when Dad was dying. I thought about forgiveness, about how it's not always a grand gesture or a dramatic moment. Sometimes it's just understanding that everyone is doing the best they can with the tools they have, even when their best isn't enough. "I'm sorry too," I said, "for disappearing after the funeral, for letting the silence grow between us, for not fighting for what I wanted until it was almost too late. You were grieving. I should have understood that. We were both grieving. We just did it differently." She nodded, and I saw tears in her eyes. "I kept thinking about the last thing Dad said to me. He said, 'Take care of your sister.' I thought I was doing that by taking the house, by handling the business side of things. But I wasn't taking care of you at all, was I?" "No," I said, honestly. "But you're here now. Does that count for anything?" I thought about it, looking around the kitchen that held so many memories of the family we used to be and maybe could be again, in some new configuration. Different, but not necessarily broken. "It's a start," I said. Jennifer visited twice more over the next month. Short visits, careful conversations, but progress nonetheless. She brought photos from her own house, pictures of her kids, her husband, the life she'd built far from our childhood neighborhood. I showed her the changes I was making to the house, the way I was bringing it back to itself while still making it mine. She never asked to move back in, or suggested we share the inheritance. She seemed to understand that this was my place now, that some kinds of justice require clear boundaries. But she also seemed to understand that being sisters didn't have to mean being the same, or wanting the same things, or even seeing the world the same way. The legal battle she'd threatened never materialized. Her lawyer had explained, in terms that even her pride couldn't argue with, that I'd followed the law perfectly, and that any challenge would be expensive and futile. More importantly, I think she finally understood that taking the house from me again wouldn't give her what she was really looking for, which was absolution for the guilt she carried about Dad's final months, and the distance that had grown between all of us. 6 months after I'd moved back home, I got a package in the mail with no return address. Inside was a small ceramic figurine, a woman in a blue dress, holding a watering can and smiling. It looked exactly like the style of Mom's collection, the one Jennifer had packed away as junk. There was a note tucked underneath. "Saw this at an antique shop and thought it belonged with the others. She looks happy, don't you think? Jay." I placed the figurine on the mantelpiece with the rest of Mom's collection, and it fit perfectly, like it had always been meant to be there. That night, I sat in the living room with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the walls golden, through windows that had witnessed decades of family dinners and Christmas mornings, and quiet evenings just like this one. The house felt complete in a way it hadn't since Mom and Dad died. Not because Jennifer had returned, but because I had finally claimed my place in it. I thought about justice, and how it's not always loud or dramatic or obvious. Sometimes justice is quiet, patient, dressed in legal language and fine print. Sometimes it comes to those who know how to read between the lines, who understand that the meek don't just inherit the earth. Sometimes they inherit the exact piece of earth they were always meant to call home. I thought about forgiveness too, and how it's not the same as forgetting or pretending that hurt didn't happen. Forgiveness, I'd learned, was more like tending a garden. It required attention and intention and time. But eventually, if you were patient enough, something beautiful could grow in soil that had once seemed too broken to nurture anything at all. The house settled around me with familiar sounds. The whisper of wind through the eaves, the gentle tick of the old clock on the mantelpiece, the distant hum of the refrigerator where I now kept fresh milk for morning coffee and ingredients. For Sunday dinners I cooked for one, but served with hope that someday there might be more plates around the table. I pulled Mom's old Afghan around my shoulders and breathed in the scent of violets from the kitchen windowsill, cinnamon from the morning's baking, and the indefinable smell of home that lives in walls that have witnessed love and loss and the quiet persistence of ordinary life. For the first time since Dad's funeral, I felt whole, not healed. I wasn't sure I'd ever be completely healed from the sharp edges of family betrayal and the hollow ache of being seen as dispensable. But whole in a different way, the way a broken bone grows back stronger at the break, the way a garden flourishes after it's been cleared of weeds. Jennifer had taught me something valuable, though I doubt she'd intended the lesson. She'd taught me that home isn't something that can be given or taken away by legal documents or family dynamics or anyone else's definition of who deserves what. Home is something you claim, something you tend, something you fight for when necessary, and forgive within when possible. She'd also taught me that sometimes the person who looks like they're losing is actually just getting ready to win, and that sometimes winning doesn't look like triumph at all. Sometimes it looks like a woman sitting alone in a house full of memories, surrounded by violets and cinnamon and the unshakable knowledge that she's exactly where she belongs. The key to the front door sat on the coffee table beside me, no longer heavy with uncertainty, but warm with possibility. Tomorrow I would wake up in the bedroom where I'd dreamed childhood dreams, make coffee in the kitchen where Mom had taught me to cook, tend the garden where Dad had shown me how to coax beauty from ordinary soil. And in the quiet spaces between those ordinary moments, I would remember that justice doesn't always wear a courtroom gown or carry a gavel. Sometimes justice wears gardening gloves and carries house keys, patient and persistent and certain of its own quiet power. They thought they could erase me from my own story, write me out of the family narrative like a character who'd served her purpose and could be forgotten. But stories, like houses, have a way of remembering who really belongs in them. And some kinds of belonging run deeper than blood, stronger than law, more enduring than the temporary victories of those who mistake possession for ownership. I was home. Finally, completely, irrevocably home. And in the gentle silence of walls that had always known my name, that felt like the only justice that mattered.